I would love to know what you think of Paddy the Baddy on a personal level. What do you think he's like? Do you think he's a nice guy? Do you think he's brash? What about his peers, right? All anybody is a collection of their friends. You want to know who your kid really is when you're not around? Go look at the people he hangs out with. He's a collection of that. So what do you think Paddy's friends are like? And I would just be curious to hear those answers. Because somewhere along the way, I was prejudiced towards Paddy. And prejudiced to mean I prejudged. Thought I knew him. Brash kid out of England. Sell some tickets. Seems marketable. Regional fighter. Get him on an undercard. Move some tickets. Yeah, one of these situations. I haven't seen anything out of him that disqualifies him from having potential to be a world champion. This was his worst performance. And he won all 3 rounds against a former champion. This was Paddy's worst performance. And it was a comeback fight. He's been removed from the ring for 13 months. This is his worst performance. And the only thing that you could say is that he got fatigued in the 3rd round, but he pushed through it anyway. I think that it's very interesting. I really do. I met Paddy, guys. I met him first time. I cannot tell you in words how wrong I had it. Oh, by the way, I met his friends. I cannot tell you in words how wrong I had it. Complete gentlemen. All of them. The buddies were gentlemen. Paddy was a gentleman. There is no shtick. This big shtick we keep waiting for from Paddy. Oh, this guy's just like Conor McGregor. Oh, he's going to be the next Conor McGregor. Oh, the fight to make is Conor McGregor versus Paddy. Imagine those press conferences. Paddy doesn't do that stuff. A lot of that is in your imagination. He's a pretty straightforward guy. He doesn't really do much shtick. He doesn't do your mama's so fat. He doesn't come out with profanity, and he doesn't come out with, oh, he's in from the bow ties to the sunglasses. This was his worst performance. Of course it was. Of course it was. He might say it wasn't. His coaches might, oh, no, he looked great. No, guys, time out. He can't. He's been out 13 months. He has a hard time making weight. First off, his body looked great. And seeing him on fight week just at a distance and passing him, he had his weight managed very well. There was some real signs of a newfound discipline. Then he's got to trade shots with Tony Ferg, who does not mind being hit at all. He did. Then he's got to protect himself. Then he finds somewhere in that, man, it might be better to wrestle this guy. That's probably not going to work considering this guy's a former national champion wrestler and I've never even had a match. And then he found himself on top. And then you get to the 3rd round, and there was some real fatigue from Paddy. And that shouldn't surprise us. We know how Tony's been training. All cardio, right? But Paddy pushed through it. He didn't buckle or wilt. He was tired, sure. And he adjusted his game plan. Get him on the ground. He didn't look to sit up and pass. And he started eating up some clock and doing just enough to keep the referee satisfied. I can't imagine anything else you would expect from him. And Dan Gable, okay? The idea of pushing the pace and the idea of using fatigue as a weapon, the idea of using conditioning as a weapon in sport came from Dan Gable, period. The end. If you go back that up, you find 1972 and it was Dan Gable. And then he took that to Iowa, took that to the Hawkeyes, built an empire. I got to talk to Dan Gable one time. And Dan Gable told me they used to do wrestling matches different. Right now, there's 6 minutes for high school. There's 7 minutes for college. They're 6 minutes for international. When Dan Gable did it, they were 9 minutes. When Dan was in the Olympics in 1972, it was 3 3-minute rounds. So now, it doesn't matter how you train. You will never be able to give everything for 9 minutes. No human can sprint for 9 minutes. You have to pick your spots. And Dan talked about that. The one and only time I spoke to him and interviewed him on my podcast, he told me that. He said, Chael, I knew the importance of conditioning. I knew fatigue makes a coward out of all men. You guys have heard that expression? Yeah, he coined it. He said, but what I had to do is I had to learn how to win a wrestling match. There's more to it than getting him tired. That's helpful. That's a secret. There's more to it. I got to have points. I got to figure out how to do that. Then once I get my points, I got to have enough energy left to protect myself when he comes to get his points back. That was all he said. It was very simple. You got to read it from there. But for Paddy to deal with fatigue, then to get a fight to the ground, to control the damage he was doing, yet stay active enough to please the official, knowing that the math is on his side. He knows he's up 2 rounds. He doesn't even need to win this round. He just needs to not get finished in the round. And I thought he looked very good doing it. I really did. Like, Tony Ferguson is never going to be an easy night. Something just tells me if you run into Tony Ferguson when he's 60 years old, he'd be a pain in the ass to fight. And a larger analysis on Tony is that is a great athlete. And he's got a great body. His body is held up. His tendons, his ligaments, his joints. He's still got his flexibility. There's something very special there. Tony Ferguson is the same age, just to put in perspective for you. Tony Ferguson is the same age as Wonderboy Thompson. Now, when you have a fresh memory in your mind because you just saw them both fight, did they look anything similar? Did they look in within 25 years of each other similar? The only thing Tony's missing, guys, and the reason that it looked the way that it looked, the reason he was having a hard time with range, he's missing his opponent, the reason he doesn't spar. Tony told me personally 5 years ago, and I have to check a calendar. It feels like it was 5 years ago. It was 25 minutes after he fought Anthony Pettis at T-Mobile. Feels like that was 5 years ago. Came up to the desk and he shared with me on a commercial break. He said, I don't spar anymore. And I heard Tony say that. I had heard him do that in interviews. But as the time's gone on, no fighter said I spar Tony. No coach has come out and said I got my arms around Tony and I'm making him spar more. On a blue moon, you will see some level of footage. Maybe he's playing around with some boxing. And as I watched him out there and as I watched him not knowing his range, just a little bit off, not quite close enough to get that wrestling to work. And then I watched Wonderboy, who's had the same experiences and he's the same age with the same goals and the same dreams, who spars 4 times a week. I'll just share with you, there's a meaningful difference. And Tony's tricky, and Tony tries, and Tony's coming after you. And Tony does have the eye of the tiger. If you want to have a conversation on Tony and what should be next, that's a separate conversation. I'm talking about Paddy right now. That's a hard situation to be in. When you have a zombie who won't go away, and when you know about yourself, I can't put him away. He's got an Eddie Bravo black belt. He's got a UFC interim belt. He's got a JC National Wrestling Championship. Like, there's nowhere for me to find this guy. So I'm going to have to grind it out. And like Dan Gable said, regardless of how much better I might be than my opponent, I have to find a way to win a wrestling match. Paddy the Baddy found a way to win the match.